this is May 22nd, 2012, and our guests are the Hartles, Dr. and Mrs. Hartle. We appreciate you giving us your time to be able to do this interview. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Doctor, let's start with you. A little bit about your personal background, where you grew up, what your mother and father did, brothers and sisters.
Okay, well, I was born in Hardin County on a farm. It was where three counties come together: Hardin, Marion, and Wyandotte. We lived in Hardin County. Our mailbox was in Marion County, across the road, on the opposite side of the road. And I went to school in Wyandotte County, which was at Marseilles, which is 3 miles from our house, which came up, actually, the county probably was only about a mile from the house, the edge of the county line. So grew up on a farm. My father had a poultry farm, and he had a hatchery. And so my job was to collect the eggs. So I never really cared that much for eggs, although I can eat them all right. I just never got to where I liked them. I do like chicken, but I helped on the farm, and I guess I got interested in medicine. I'm not sure really why, except that I just like to know how things tick. I had said that I might have been an engineer, and my mother said that I always wanted to run a junkyard. But
you were a collector.
I was always interested in junkyard. Yeah, I collected things. I still collect things. But at one point that I think I got interested was when I helped our veterinarian do a bowel surgery on a cow that had an obstructed bowel. I think it was an intussusception or rotated bowel, something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I helped him do the surgery. And they resected a part of the colon of the cow. Cow didn't make it, but or at least not. She may have made it through the surgery and all, but I know it died later. But that was a really first contact I actually had in doing anything from a medical standpoint. But I decided I didn't want to be a veterinarian. I'd rather go into people medicine.
So maybe that was the first spark.
I think it may have been. I mean, I think the only other thing that I can think of was just my curiosity. I mean, some people say that they really like to help people. I don't know if that was really my stimulus, but and so I really can't pinpoint any one thing.
That's pretty interesting. And anything else that came into second place in terms of what you might thought?
You mean pushing me into medicine? No, I don't think so. Except I didn't want to stay on the farm. I had enough hard work on the farm when I was a kid, and so my sister had gone to Ohio State and graduated in home ec, and so that's where I went to school in pre-med. And I said my dad had a poultry farm, and he raised turkeys to send my sister through school. I dressed turkeys and sold them at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so they did the same thing for me when I went to undergrad school and pre-med. And I remember selling turkeys. I'd take them down to Columbus and sell them at some of the restaurants around the university there. I don't know if you knew of Prosciutti's restaurant out on West 5th Avenue. Yeah. And we sold them turkeys for their restaurant and Thanksgiving and Christmas. The first time, my dad used to go to deliver chickens to Columbus or near Columbus. I remember when it was probably around 1940, 41, and I would have been about 9 years old, and I remember going with him. Maybe it was later than that. I don't know, but it was in the early 40s. Taking boxes of chickens, baby chicks, to Columbus. And I remember seeing the Levesque Lincoln Tower, which at that time it didn't seem very far away. I mean, it couldn't have been more than a half mile, I wouldn't think, or maybe a mile, but it seemed awfully close. And of course now, wherever that farm was would be part of Columbus, I'm sure, or be all built up. And he also sold baby chicks to George Byers, who ran Byers automotive thing. He had chickens in layers in cages that would collect the eggs as they rolled out, and it was quite a setup. And my dad sold him chickens.
When did you begin medical school?
I graduated from high school in 1950 and went to Ohio State. I applied for medical school on a 3-year medical program for after the end of 3 years pre-med. I applied for medical school. It was on a program that was set up that way. But I didn't get into medical school in 3 years. I went back and asked, Ronald Thompson was the auditor, and he's the one of, I think there were 2 people that came in my interview. And so I wondered why I didn't get in. I went back and asked him. I had good grades. He said, well, we just thought you could go another year. Of course, I was probably one of the youngest in my class. I was born in November, and at that time you didn't have to wait another year. You went, and so I started school when I was only 5 years old, I guess. And so anyway, so the next year I applied again for Ohio State, and I also applied for Case Western Reserve and Johns Hopkins. And I hadn't even gotten a reply, I don't think, from them, or at least I'm not even real sure I sent in the formal application. I know I got applications. And I went back to Ohio State for another interview, and all they did was ask me what I did during the summer. He said, you're in the medical school. And it was same Ronald Thompson that gave me that interview. And so I started medical school, and I graduated undergrad in '54, and we were married then in September '54, and I started in just a couple of weeks after we were married.
Wow. And residency where?
Well, I took, in my senior year of medical school, I was in this Army or military senior medical student program for the military. So I was on active duty during my senior year of medical school, paid second lieutenant's pay. And then I applied for internship at Brooke Army Hospital. Actually, I applied at Brooke and Tripler in Hawaii and in Washington, D.C., Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. Of course, the one I got was Brooke Army Hospital in San Antonio. It was nice, but it would have been nice to go to Hawaii, but but I didn't get that. Yeah. Anyway, so I spent a year at Brooke, then on my internship. And when I finished the internship, I had to take the basic military training for, I don't know, 3 months, I guess it was. Or maybe it's just a month, I don't know, for medical officers. And then went into a preventive medicine program to be a preventive medicine officer. And I think that was 2 or 3 months program. And at that time, then she was expecting our second child. And so we got a deferment, and for being transferred out to Europe, and so I worked in the Fort Sam Houston dispensary for 3 months until after she delivered, and so in early January 1960, we went to Germany for 3 years. And that was a very nice experience, really. I enjoyed my military service.
Right.
And she enjoyed being in Germany. We had of course, it was a 3-year tour, and so we were authorized military housing. But they didn't have any military housing open when we got there. Actually, we got some concurrent travel, which was a little bit of a subterfuge, I guess you could call. When I found out where I was going, it was the 3rd Infantry Division at Würzburg, Germany. We contacted the Surgeon General's office, or Division Surgeon's office there, and about in order to get concurrent travel, you had to have a place to live for your family at your station of assignment. And so I got a letter back, or a telegram, with an address, and it was signed by one of my fellow interns who had left a little earlier than I had. And so we had an address to go to Germany, and so we went on this same plane with a whole plane load of, it was a Constellation full of dependents, wives and their children, and some military officers or military personnel. And when we got there, then we found out that the address was an address. That's it. There was no place to live there. It was just an address so we could get our concurrent travel. So we lived for 1 month in an old German Army BOQ in one big room with 2 kids, one 2 years and one 3 weeks.
6 weeks.
No, it's even more. 2 months, I guess it was. 2 months, 3 months. Anyway, on the 2nd floor of a BOQ, and the ladies' restroom was on the 1st floor. So she had to go down to the 1st floor to do diapers, and we were cloth diapers. Didn't have disposable diapers then. That was before that time. And so then I went about trying to find a place to live, which I had it was a young lady from the special services section that was German, and she could interview the people that were renting the property and help me find a house to live in. And so we found a house in a little suburb town. Actually, it was a little neighboring town. It was a small farming village. When it was unfurnished house, but we were authorized, since we were authorized government housing, I could get furniture from the quartermaster supply depot. And of course, they were short on some things, like they had mattresses, but no springs. So what we got was 2 mattresses and put them together, inner spring mattresses. We didn't have any springs under them. And for a dresser, we had a huge map case with drawers that were about 4 feet wide. And of course, German houses didn't have closets. So we had locker, wooden locker that we use for closets.
Well, how and when did Lancaster come up on the Hartle's radar?
Well, of course, we spent 3 years there in Würzburg, and the last, I knew that when I finished my 3-year tour, I wasn't going to stay in the service because I didn't want to. The reason, mainly, well, there were two reasons really. I didn't want to. Main thing, really, I didn't want to have our kids travel all over there, and I thought we should settle down and have a home. But also, Vietnam was coming on, and I knew as a preventive medicine officer, that's probably where I'd end up. And so I have sent letters to 30 different communities in Ohio to find out information about places to stay. Actually, I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself though, because I did, when I came back, I did take a general practice residency, a year and a half at Riverside. We came back in January, so I started in the 1st of February, I think it was, and then went through to a whole year beyond that to the class that ended in July of the following year, in 1964. And I guess it was during the time then during my residency that I wrote to the 30 different communities in Ohio, but Lancaster was not one of them. I thought Lancaster was down in the hills, and I didn't know if I'd want to live down there. But when I was a resident at Children's, I got in touch with, well, there was a cardiologist, Dr. Clark was a cardiologist in Columbus. I don't remember his first name now. And Dr. Clark here was a cousin of his. And Dr. Clark here in Lancaster was in the process of wanting to close up his family practice and just specialize in OB with Dr. Erling. And I had already, by that time, somehow, I don't remember how I got in contact with a doctor up on the lake at Vermilion. And actually, I had gone up there and visited, and then I had made arrangements to go in with him. But Dr. Clark had also come up and talked to me at when I was on pediatrics at Children's Hospital, and told me about the possibility of coming down here and taking over his practice. And I thought that was good, but I had already sort of made some commitment to go to Vermilion. I'd also looked at several other different places too, but so it so happened then on New Year's Eve, I think it was, in 1963, that the doctor called me up from Vermilion, and his wife had had problems with asthma, and he was having, I don't know, I guess he didn't have any difficulty, but anyway, he decided to leave and move to Arizona for his wife's health. He offered me to buy his practice. Not the equipment, not the building he had, but just buy his practice. Well, the doctors at Riverside said, if you buy his practice, you're crazy to buy a practice. He said, if you want to go to Vermilion, go to Vermilion, but don't buy a practice. He said, you could just set a shingle out and start out in family practice without buying practice. And of course, then Dr. Clark had asked me about coming down here, and I thought, well, gee, I come down here and looked around and thought it was nice, and so Dr. Clark gave me his practice. I didn't have to buy anything except set up the office to practice in. So I took Dr. Clark's family practice, and I took Dr. Erling's office and set up on at 414 East Main Street.
And that was 64?
64.
Wow.
I saw my first patient on the 4th of July, 1964 in a house call.
Wow.
And Dr. Clark set up appointments for me. I started on, it was Monday the 13th of July. I opened the office and I had 22 patients, I think, on the schedule, and several more that came in besides that.
How common were house calls back then for you?
Oh, house calls. I made house calls a lot.
Wednesday
Actually-
afternoon.
What?
Wednesdays.
Well, yes, mostly Wednesday afternoon, but Dr. Clark did house calls. You should know Dr. Clark started practice in Sugar Grove, and he had a lot of people who lived in the country down around Sugar Grove, and actually some in Hockin County. So I don't know. I think he had about 10 or 15 people that he made regular house calls on a routine basis, and I took over those plus picking up more. I made house calls really until I retired. And actually, even after I retired, I had 2 or 3 patients that I made house calls on. Actually, it wasn't I retired. I was, after I closed the office, and I closed the office in 1992, and then continued to work as a medical director at Crestview until the end of 1997. And Dr. Ginty came in 1992, and he took most of the patients I had, and then he came and went into practice with Dr. Romaker and let's see,
Sprouse and Abby.
Sprouse and Abby, yeah.
Yeah. Any memorable incidents occurred during your practice? Something that sticks out that you were proud of being involved with?
Yeah,
unusual?
we were talking about that here, and one incident, of course, we went to the state parks for a week once a year in the fall, and took the kids and just relaxed. And she pointed out that there was at least one Saturday, and I think maybe more than one, but one and remembered in particularly that they were waiting in the car ready to go to the state park while I was making a delivery at the hospital.
We were waiting for the delivery.
What?
We were waiting for the baby to come. That was when he was doing OB.
Yeah, I did OB for about 10 years.
And those things, you can't schedule those.
No.
Wow.
And well, there's another incident I remember. I was making a house call. This man called me. He lived in Logan, and I hadn't made any house calls in Logan. I hadn't been to Logan. This was after, I don't know, after I'd been here a year or so anyway, I think. But anyway, it was one of Dr. Clark's patients, and he had a problem during the night, called me up about 2 o'clock in the morning. And of course, there were a lot of calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I said, yeah, I'll come down and see you. And so I went to Logan, and I was looking for this house number along the street, and police car stopped me, wondered what I was doing. I guess he was surprised when he found out I was trying to find a number for a house call.
I'll be darned.
But took care of the man and come home.
What was the hospital like when you arrived?
Well,
physically and technically?
Of course, that was before they built a new hospital. there were about 35 doctors on the staff, and it was the old part of the hospital was faced on Ewing Street there, and back off the street, and there was a drive that went up from the street around up to the front of the hospital. I guess there was a parking lot off to the side, and it. I thought we had a very good hospital for the size of it. I mean, and actually, when I was at Riverside, the radiologist remarked what a great radiology department we had with Dr. Jones and Welsh, and their reputation was very well known and very highly respected by the other radiologists in Columbus, at least at Riverside. And and it's amazing what they could do with the little space they had in the basement of the old hospital. And the laboratory was in the basement right across the hall, and Dr. Milliken was the pathologist when I came, and he was there for several years. And then one incident I had when I was first here, when I first came, I went to the hospital, and I was walking down the floor on the OB floor. And I guess I had a patient to see up there. I don't know if I had made any deliveries yet then or not. I don't think so, but I was walking down the floor on OB floor, and the nurse came up to me and says, "You're not supposed to be up here if you're under 16. So I guess I looked pretty young. I was actually 32, but
Wow, yeah, compliment. Did you make?
But I don't think she was kidding either. I think she was meant it, really. That's how young I look. Of course, see some of the other doctors now. I think they look pretty young too.
Who was the administrator at that time? Do you remember?
I don't remember his name. It was. I think whoever it was when I first came was sort of a heavy-set person, but I can't remember her name. McKelvey was later. I know that was some time later.
Not Walter Stewart?
It may have been Walter Stewart.
Maybe it
It
was.
may have been, yes,
Yeah.
I think it probably was.
I think so.
Yes,
That's too far
I
back.
think that's who it was.
Yeah.
And then there was Mr. Likes for a while.
Well, that was later after
That was
McKelvey.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friendships that you made with colleagues?
Well, I thought that the medical community of Lancaster was outstanding, really, both in friendship and also in ability of doctors too. But when I was, after I was here a couple of years, wasn't too long, I was active in the Ohio State Medical Association. I was on the board, I guess it was. They weren't called the board of directors, but it was the same thing as the board of directors. And I know we had problems with communities, with the physicians, particularly I remember one episode down in Hillsborough where the doctors really were feuding between surgeons, and it was two different groups of surgeons and anesthesiologists. And actually, the director that lived in Cincinnati was over Hillsborough, and he had to go and help resolve some disputes. It almost closed the hospital, and then there were some others that I knew about too. And here we had no problem. We had the most congenial medical community I think that you could find anywhere, and everybody knew everybody, you know. I mean, we had a lot of fun. They had, particularly at Christmas time, we had little run skits at the country club. We had a Christmas dinner at the country club. Because they still have Christmas dinners at the country club. But we had skits, and I remember particularly Dr. Whitstone and Dr. Kirkpatrick and some of the wives with them. They running a skit on the well, it was the well, not the devil, but the
Yeah, you were talking about the camaraderie among the physicians in the community as well. Any advice for new physicians coming out of medical school now, that with the experience that you've gone through and the changes that you've seen?
well, I think that it's a lot more difficult. At least my impression is it'll be a lot more difficult to get started, particularly in solo practice. And I don't think very many people go into solo practice anymore. I guess in addition to being well prepared and studying hard, you shouldn't be too much involved in your practice that you can't take a little time and take time to smell the roses and take care of your family and have more of some free time. I know I'm sure that our kids thought that I wasn't home a whole lot of the time and would come home and late at night and I don't know if I got home for supper very often, really.
Well, we had supper at 6 o'clock, whether you were there or not.
She had a warmer that would warm up keep the dishes warm until I got home.
That's before microwaves.
This is probably a good time to talk with Mrs. Hartle about the experience of having living with a physician. What was that those times like?
Well, we all had to answer the phone, Dr. Hartle's residence. The kids all had to learn that. And then we had to unlearn it after he retired. Well, when he first came to town, it was June 1964, and we rented a house for a year. And I was pregnant. And it so happened that I went into labor on a Wednesday, which is his day to make house calls. So he was calling after he'd go to one house and he'd call. Then he'd go to the next house and he'd call. And I made it to almost supper time. We had to call the sitter to come in. So that was kind of a iffy afternoon.
Yeah, wow. But he'd check in.
But all worked out well.
Yeah.
And what more can I say?
And what did you think of the community in
Oh.
terms of a place to make a home?
Oh, it was wonderful. The first year we took our oldest boy, he went to the Y summer camp. We got involved with the Y right away. And he played ball, and you know, as the kids came along, they learned to swim. And as time allowed, I would go down too. So the Y was a big part of our, and the church. We went to church, and they went to Sunday school. We had a nice neighbor that lived down, and my boys delivered papers. It just was a nice time. We had a big yard, we still do. They thought it was a wonderful yard, and they all learned how to use the mower, the John Deere. And at certain times, they take turns mowing the grass. We miss that now.
Yeah. It's good thinking time when you're on the mower. Yeah. How about hobbies? Did you two share hobbies, whether it was travel or?
Oh, we shared travel. Yeah, we liked to travel.
We rented a motorhome one year and took the kids.
Yeah, we rented a motorhome.
Well,
1970, I think, was the first time we rented a motorhome. Went out west uh, with our 4 kids. It was a big Unger motorhome. They don't make them anymore. And
what year do we go to Europe?
the kids, it had a bed in the back and a curtain, and we just let the kids go in the back and do what they wanted. And if they, you know, how kids get restless in the back seat of a car, well, they were back and we didn't worry about them. They could have their fights and whatever back in the back of the motorhome, and we didn't worry about it. And we went all the way to the Rocky Mountains and back. I think it took about a week.
What year do we go overseas?
In 1974, we went to Europe and took all our 4 kids, and we rented a motorhome in England and took it to across the channel on a. We flew across on a hovercraft with and toured through France and
Germany.
and stopped and saw Emily Rollins at Switzerland, in Bern, Switzerland. She was she took us to one of her rehearsals, and then Germany, of course, and we stayed at the friends that we had made in Germany. We stayed at their house, and that was where the kids had the best time. They couldn't speak German, but they got along real well, and with the couple that we knew there, and then come back through Belgium and on back to England. Went to around England for a time.
What in terms of the local community? How do you see? Well, I guess medicine in general. Where do you see Fairfield Medical Center now, and possibly its position in the future in the healthcare community, our community?
Well, I'm always amazed at the progress that we've made at Fairfield Medical Center. I mean, since they built it, from the time they built a new hospital and everything, and in the especially in the last 10 or 15 years, that it's just grown and very progressive advances in technology and the especially cardiology. I know I helped Dr. Snyder set up the first ICU on the West Wing in the old hospital, and we had one room with 2 beds. And of course, then when they built the new hospital, we had a big ICU, and I don't know, I guess there were 8 sections for patients there, at least 8 or 10. And I don't know how many they have now. I mean, since I retired 15 years ago, I haven't been up to the ICU. But with the number of new physicians and new specialties that we've gotten, and like I said, there were about 35 doctors on the staff when I came in '64, and now I know there's over 200. And I think they have just about every specialty except neurosurgery.
Yeah, it's grown quite a bit.
And it's fantastic, really, how the hospital has grown. I mean, it really is a medical center now. I mean, when I came, it was a little community hospital, and it's developed into a real outstanding medical center, and I think it's going to keep going that way.
Yeah.
We have a good chief officer, Mina Ewing.
Yeah.
Well, doctor, I mean, they have open heart surgery, they have good orthopedics, and so those.
Yeah, it's come together really well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, any other final?
I don't know. I just going to say that I enjoyed surgery. I mean, of course, I assisted in surgery with all my patients. And of course, one thing, when I came, as far as medical liability, it was very minimal worry. Didn't worry about it. Actually, when I was in the service, I never had any liability insurance. About the time I got out of the service, there were some reports of some problems, and people started getting liability insurance. I got liability insurance when I opened a practice, and a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, I found the bill that I had during my first year. I think it was about the second. It was a notice from the insurance company that my insurance premium was doubled because I was assisting with surgery. My premium was, I think, $35 and doubled to $70 a year.
Yeah.
And of course, it was over 10,000, I think, when I retired.
Wow. Yeah, things change.
But that was one big change in the time that I was in practice. That things, I mean, it just kept getting worse. They talk about doing procedures to avoid liability, and it's true. I mean, you worried about it. I was sued twice. Once, the first time I was by an individual that she had a hip fracture that I didn't recognize, or it was a hip, or I think it was a hip fracture. I had just gotten an X-ray on her hip within 3 months before that, and she had slipped at home and didn't fall, but just slipped, and I didn't think she had that. I sent her to physical therapy, and she wasn't getting better, and she went to another doctor, and he got an X-ray and found she had a fracture. And so she sued me, and I was about the third year I was here, I think, something like that. And of course, it was kind of stressful. But of course, she was my best witness because she would go into the X-ray department, carrying her crutches, and so Ray Lance was my attorney for the Medical Protective Company, and we went into the trial and started a trial, and they settled it. They picked a jury, and then before the trial started, they settled it out of court for $500, which was, I don't even think, paid the attorney. And then, of course, the strange part of it, by that time, she had sued her attorney for some reason, I can't remember what the reason was, but she sued her attorney I think before the case was over.
So defensive medicine is a big part of today's world.
Yeah, defensive medicine, that's what I was trying to think of, the word I was trying to think of. And and then the other thing really that was difficult was the increasing government interference and control. I know I was, for one instance, I would do, when the procedure became available, I was doing throat swab tests for strep throat to prevent rheumatic fever and so forth. And the regulations came down from Washington that you had to have approval for a laboratory before you could do that test. And so really, I wouldn't get paid for it anymore if I did it. And I don't know, there were just things like that. And also, you know, I mean, I was doing my own urinalysis and all, and checking them in the microscope, and I guess that I qualified to do that, but I didn't qualify to do the throat swab to pick up the strep screening. And when after I retired, I was really stressed out, and I was doing. I was medical director at Crestview Extended Care Facility for probably about 10 years before I retired, before I closed the office, and doing both, and really stressed out. And after a year or so after I was closed the office, I felt a lot better. I was still doing medical director at Crestview, at 3 days out there 3 days a week, and but I felt better physically and mentally than at that time than I was during the time I was practicing the last year. My dad had Alzheimer's, died of Alzheimer's, and I thought I was getting it, but because I couldn't remember things.
To all of us.
I don't have any. I mean, now that's been 15 years ago, and I can remember things as well now as I could, but better probably than when I closed the office.
Well, I want to thank you both for taking part in this. We really appreciate it. I think learning these stories from physicians of today and physicians who've retired, it's going to mean a lot to the foundation itself, and we consider it very valuable. So thanks for your time.
Well, I must say that I really enjoyed my time in medical practice. The only thing was that all the extra stress and all was just getting more than, and I think the ones that come out now are you know, you don't have the change. You come into it with a fresh young mind, and it's not the same as if you grow up and develop it, add stress to more freedom that you knew before.
Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate all the years that you contributed to the community and to the medical center. It's proved extremely valuable, and you've made a lot of great friends, and the community and the hospital thanks you very much for that.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.